Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce built everything together. They worked side by side on 3 championships, 8 seasons, and shared a bond they both call brotherhood. Yet, a single sideline moment may have just ruined everything. Everyone is talking about the latest confrontation about the 2 champions. Let's get into it. The moment that started it all. The clip that went viral came from the 2025 NFL regular season, specifically from Kansas City's Week 12 matchup against the Indianapolis Colts. And to understand why it landed the way it did, you have to understand the exact conditions that surrounded it, because nothing about that moment existed in a vacuum. The Chiefs were in trouble. Down 11 points heading into the fourth quarter, the offense had been misfiring for most of the afternoon, and Kelce, the man who had been the security blanket for this offense for nearly a decade, the player opposing defenses had built entire game plans around stopping, was barely a factor. 4 catches, 43 yards, numbers that, for any other tight end in the league, would be a perfectly serviceable afternoon. For Kelce, against the standard he himself had built over 13 NFL seasons and 11 Pro Bowl selections, it looked like a ghost performance. The kind of day that gets circled, the kind of day that fuels a narrative. And then the cameras caught it. A sideline exchange between Mahomes and Kelce. Words, gestures, the kind of intensity that, when the mics are hot and the editors are watching, turns into a thumbnail with a fire emoji and a question mark. The kind of moment that social media was built to misread. The clip spread fast. Comments flooded in. People called it a crack in the armor. Some said Kelce looked frustrated. Others said Mahomes looked like he was checking his guy. A handful of accounts posted it with captions like Rift, Fallout, and First Public Blowup. Fan accounts stitched it together with older clips, pulled from different games, different seasons, different contexts entirely. YouTube channels built entire videos around a few seconds of footage. The algorithm did the rest, amplifying urgency, rewarding the most inflammatory interpretation, and burying everything that might complicate the story. But here is what the actual game showed. The Chiefs came back. Down 11 with 15 minutes left, they did not fold. They did not go through the motions of a team that had already mentally checked out of its season. They fought offensively, defensively, on special teams, and they found a way to force overtime. Harrison Butker hit a field goal with no time left in regulation to tie it. Then, in overtime, Mahomes led an 81-yard drive capped by another Butker field goal to win it 23-20. Kareem Hunt carried the ball 30 times for 104 yards and a touchdown. Rashee Rice caught 8 passes for 141 yards. A team that had been down 11 points in the fourth quarter walked off the field with a win. That is the game the viral clip came from. Not a blowout, not a collapse, a comeback. The kind of comeback that requires every player on that roster to be locked in together, including, and especially, the 2 men whose sideline exchange had been turned into content before the final whistle even blew. Elite competitors do not sit quietly on the sideline when their back is against the wall. They talk, they push, they argue routes and reads and missed opportunities with the kind of directness that most workplaces would never tolerate, because that directness is precisely what separates the teams that win close games from the teams that lose them. What the camera caught was not unusual. What was unusual was that the camera caught it at all. The context around this clip goes much deeper than one game though, and to understand why the internet reacted the way it did, why the footage landed with the weight that it did, you have to understand where both of these men were at in the 2025 season and what had been building for months before that sideline camera caught them mid-conversation. The 2025 Chiefs were not the team anyone had come to expect. The machine that had produced 3 Super Bowl titles, back-to-back championships, and 9 straight AFC West crowns was grinding. Visibly, publicly grinding. The offense looked stale at times, predictable in ways it had never been under Andy Reid, slow to adjust to what defenses were taking away. Mahomes was making uncharacteristic errors, the kind of mistakes that in prior seasons had been so rare they barely registered. And Kelce, who had put together 7 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons between 2016 and 2022 and had shattered every meaningful record the tight end position had ever produced, was having the worst statistical season of his career by a significant margin. The weight of a franchise in transition, sitting on the shoulders of 2 men who had carried it so far for so long, was real. And that weight is what made that sideline exchange look the way it looked. Not animosity, not a feud, weight. Mahomes addressed the losses directly in the post-game that day. He said that in all 5 of their defeats that season, there were plays, specific, winnable plays that the Chiefs had not made. Plays that, had they gone differently, could have flipped the record entirely. That kind of precision in self-assessment, that refusal to hide behind vague team speak, is the mark of a competitor who holds himself and everyone around him to an exact standard. And it is also the clearest possible explanation for what that sideline footage actually was. Two men who hold themselves to an exact standard, in the middle of a season that was not meeting it, doing the only thing they know how to do, demanding more. A dynasty under pressure. To fully feel the weight of what that sideline exchange represented, you have to understand just how dramatically the ground had shifted beneath this franchise by November of 2025, and how jarring that shift was for everyone who had spent years watching this team operate as though winning was simply their natural state. The Kansas City Chiefs dynasty had been built on something that went beyond talent. Plenty of teams have talent. What Kansas City had, from 2018 through the 2024 season, was an almost supernatural sense of inevitability. When Mahomes was on the field, the Chiefs found a way. When Kelce was targeted, the chains moved. When the fourth quarter arrived and the pressure was at its highest, this team did not panic. It accelerated. That was the brand. That was the operating principle that the entire AFC had been forced to accept and plan around for the better part of a decade. 9 straight AFC West titles, 5 Super Bowl appearances, 3 Lombardi trophies, a franchise record that had made the word dynasty feel insufficient, because dynasties eventually end, and this one had refused to. Under Andy Reid's play calling, Mahomes' improvisation, and Kelce's reliability, the Chiefs had constructed something that looked, from the outside, genuinely permanent. The 2025 season dismantled all of that, piece by piece, in real time. And it did so in the most painful way possible. Not through a sudden collapse, but through a slow, grinding erosion of everything that had made the dynasty feel inevitable. The Chiefs opened the year with losses that felt out of character, close games that in previous seasons they would have found a way to win on the strength of one Mahomes scramble, one Kelce third down conversion, one late game adjustment from Reid were slipping away. The margin that had always seemed to exist between this team and its opponents had narrowed to the point where it was no longer reliable. And as the losses accumulated, the questions that had always existed at the edges of the conversation about this team's future started moving toward the center. Was the offensive scheme too predictable? Had the league caught up to what Reid and Mahomes were doing? Was Kelce's decline, physical, statistical, undeniable by the midpoint of the season, more significant than the team was willing to admit publicly? And most uncomfortably, was Mahomes, for the first time in his career, playing in a system that was limiting him rather than liberating him? These were not fringe questions by November. They were the questions being asked on every major sports platform, in every pregame show, by every analyst who had spent years singing the praises of this franchise. The dynasty, for the first time, felt genuinely mortal. And Kelce, who had been one of the cornerstones of that dynasty's identity, whose presence in the lineup had been as reliable as anything in professional football for a decade, was at the center of the most uncomfortable conversation. His statistical decline in 2025 was not subtle. It was the kind of drop that, for a player of his age and his contract status, invites a very specific and very public discussion about whether the end has arrived. Retirement speculation followed him through every week of the season. Every quiet game was treated as potential evidence. Every missed target was cataloged. By week 12, the Chiefs were 5-5. In almost any other era of this franchise, that record at the halfway point would have triggered a full institutional crisis. In the context of the 2025 season, it was simply where they were, a reality the players acknowledged directly and without deflection. The playoff picture was dire. The division was out of reach. The wild card was not guaranteed. For a team that had spent 9 consecutive years as the AFC's dominant force, a 23% playoff probability felt like the floor falling out. It was in this climate, a season defined by underperformance, mounting pressure, public doubt, and the very real possibility that the dynasty's run was over, that the sideline footage went viral. The optics were always going to be charged. A tense exchange between Mahomes and Kelce, captured in the middle of a game that the Chiefs desperately needed to win during a season that had already asked more of both of them than any season in recent memory, was always going to look like more than it was. What mattered, and what the full picture reveals, is that the pressure of 2025 was real. It was felt by both men, and it produced the kind of sideline intensity that competitive athletes produce when the stakes are high and the margin for error has disappeared. That is the full context. That is what the viral clip was actually documenting. The competitive fire that built a dynasty. Here is the thing about Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce that the viral clip crowd consistently misses, and it is the most important thing to understand about both of them individually and about what their partnership has always looked like up close. The intensity that made that sideline footage look alarming is the exact same intensity that built 3 Super Bowl championships. You cannot separate the two. You do not get one without the other. The fire that makes them occasionally look heated on a sideline camera is the same fire that has produced the most decorated quarterback-tight end partnership in the history of the postseason. These are not two men who float through their careers. They are not passive beneficiaries of each other's talent, showing up on Sundays and collecting the rewards of a system that runs itself. Mahomes is, by the testimony of practically every player, coach, and analyst who has spent meaningful time around him, the most competitive human being in any building he walks into. He studies film with an obsessiveness that his teammates describe as almost unsettling. He argues with coaches about play calls, not because he is difficult, but because he cares about the details with an intensity that most people reserve for things that are genuinely life or death. He holds himself to a standard that has no off switch, not in practice, not in the preseason, not in a Week 12 game against a team that is 8-3, while Kansas City is fighting to stay above 500, and Kelce matches that energy in a way that almost nobody else in the league could. Mahomes has said publicly, not in a post-game quote designed to generate goodwill, but in the middle of honest assessments of how they work, that Kelce gets angry when he is taken out of practice. Think about what that means. A player who has made 11 Pro Bowls, who holds every meaningful tight end record the league has ever produced, who has 3 Super Bowl rings, and a cultural presence that extends far beyond football, that player still gets angry when the coaching staff tries to give him a rest in practice. That is not the disposition of someone who brings casual energy to a high-stakes sideline moment in November. Their on-field chemistry has been one of the most analyzed partnerships in the modern game, and for good reason. It operates on a level of mutual understanding that defenses have never found a reliable answer to. Mahomes' improvisational style, the ability to extend plays long past the designed structure of the route tree, to create time with his legs while keeping his eyes moving through progressions, to trust that his target will find the right spot even when the pocket has collapsed entirely, works at the level it does because Kelce has made himself available on every single one of those broken plays for 8 consecutive seasons. He does not just run his assigned route and stop. He reads Mahomes' movement, adjusts his path based on where the scramble is taking the quarterback, and positions himself in the space that the defense has vacated. It is football played at a level of intuition that most players can describe, but very few can actually execute. Defenses have understood this for years. The coverage decisions opponents make against Kansas City are built, in significant part, around disrupting the Mahomes-Kelce connection specifically. Teams bracket Kelce. They disguise their coverages pre-snap to prevent Mahomes from identifying the soft zone that Kelce will attack. They commit extra bodies to the tight end side of the formation and accept that doing so will leave other players with one-on-one opportunities elsewhere. They have been doing this for years, and even accounting for all of it, Kelce had produced numbers that no tight end in the history of the position had ever approached. What produced those numbers, what produced 3 Super Bowls and 5 conference championship appearances and a run of sustained excellence that the league had not seen at the quarterback tight end position since Brady and Gronkowski, was not a gentle, conflict-free partnership conducted entirely with grace and composure. It was built on the kind of direct, honest, sometimes visibly intense communication that elite competitors use to hold each other to impossible standards. The sideline exchanges were never gentle. The film room conversations were never soft. The feedback that these two men gave each other across 8 seasons was the kind of feedback that only works between people who trust each other completely, because without that trust, it would feel like criticism. With it, it feels like care. That is what the camera caught. Not a fight, not a fracture, care, expressed in the language that 2 deeply competitive people use when they are in the middle of something that matters enormously, and the margin between succeeding and failing has never felt smaller. Even on the day of the viral clip, in the post-game when Mahomes was breaking down what had worked and what had not, Kelce entered his answers naturally, not as a subject of concern, not as a player whose performance needed to be carefully addressed, but as the structural center around which the entire offensive conversation still revolved. The coverage decisions made to stop Kelce were the reason other players had gotten open. The attention paid to him was the reason the comeback had been possible. The competitive fire is real. It has always been real. From the inside of that building, it has always been the point, the engine that drives everything, the standard that everybody else in the locker room is measured against. It just rarely gets captured on camera in a way that makes it look like what it actually is. Off the field, brotherhood and business. The story of Mahomes and Kelce does not begin and end at the white lines. And to understand why the idea of a genuine rift between them is so completely disconnected from reality, you have to spend time with what their relationship actually looks like in the spaces that exist between games, the places where the cameras are not pointed at a sideline, and the only thing that matters is who these two men actually are to each other. Kelce has called Mahomes family, not in the reflexive, hollow way that athletes reach for that word at podiums when they are trying to sound like good teammates or dodge a question about locker room chemistry. He said it in December 2025, sitting at their jointly owned restaurant in Kansas City, talking about what Mahomes means to him in the most direct terms he could find. He said that through all the hard work and all the time they had spent together outside the facility, there would never be a goodbye between them, not a retirement send-off, not a final handshake after careers diverge, just another day, another chapter, an ongoing relationship that does not have a defined endpoint because neither of them has ever framed it that way. That statement came in the middle of the hardest season either of them had faced since Mahomes became the starter. Quiet stat lines, retirement speculation circling Kelce every single week, a team that was barreling toward its first missed playoff appearance in a decade. And in the middle of all of that, when the easiest thing in the world would have been to give a careful, professional non-answer about team dynamics and individual focus, Kelce talked about Mahomes the way people talk about the people in their lives who are genuinely permanent. Mahomes has matched that energy consistently and without performance. He refers to Kelce as his brother, and the people around both of them describe that framing as accurate rather than diplomatic. Their families have spent time together in ways that go far beyond the obligatory team events and charity appearances that professional athletes use to manufacture the appearance of closeness. They have traveled together. They have been present for each other's significant personal moments. When Kelce's relationship with Taylor Swift became one of the most widely covered stories in popular culture, Mahomes was reportedly one of the first people Kelce told, a detail that is small in isolation, but enormous in what it reveals about the actual texture of their friendship. You tell the people you genuinely trust first. You manage the people you are simply professional with. Their friendship did not begin when the cameras arrived. It was built in the quiet spaces, late nights in Kansas City during Mahomes' early years in the league, golf outings, the gradual accumulation of shared experience that creates the kind of trust that does not dissolve under pressure. Former teammates have described their dynamic as brothers who challenge each other constantly. Not in a performative way, not in the carefully managed way that teams sometimes construct public-facing relationships between their stars, but in the direct and occasionally uncomfortable way that genuine closeness actually operates. And then there is the business dimension, because for two men who have spent 8 years building something together on the field, the decision to build something together off it is not incidental. In late 2025, Mahomes and Kelce opened 1587 Prime, a high-end steakhouse in Kansas City whose name stitches their jersey numbers together into something that belongs equally to both of them. Number 15, number 87, one restaurant, one name. A physical space in their city that announces without any ambiguity that these two men's identities are linked in ways that extend beyond whatever happens on a football field on Sunday afternoons. That restaurant did land them in a shared legal matter in early 2026. A sneaker company called 1587 Sneakers filed a trademark infringement lawsuit in the Southern District of New York in February of that year, claiming that the steakhouse's use of 1587 created consumer confusion with their brand. A judge denied the plaintiff's request for an emergency restraining order. Trademark attorneys who followed the case publicly described it as a difficult one for the plaintiff, given how distinct the categories of upscale dining and athletic footwear are in the eyes of consumers and courts alike. The case remains ongoing as of early 2026. When Mahomes found out, he posted on Instagram photos of the two of them, a ticking clock, an arrow pointing forward, more time, more seasons, more of whatever comes next, together. That is not the social media behavior of two men whose relationship has been damaged by a sideline camera and a misleading headline. What the footage actually tells us. Here is what nobody making the thumbnails wants you to sit with. The most revealing thing about that sideline footage is not the intensity, it is what happened after it. The Chiefs came back from 11 points down. Butker tied it with no time left in regulation. They won in overtime, and the two men whose sideline exchange had been screenshotted and captioned and turned into evidence of a fracture, they walked off that field together, having just done what they have always done. Found a way. In the middle of a difficult season, against a team they needed to beat, with their playoff hopes depending on the outcome, they found a way. The same way they had found ways in January games and Super Bowls and fourth quarters that looked unwinnable from the outside. The same way. That is the pattern. That has always been the pattern, and a pattern that has held across 8 seasons, 5 Super Bowl appearances, 3 championships, and more high-pressure moments than most franchises experience in a generation, does not break because a sideline camera caught the wrong 3 seconds at the wrong moment in a November game. The research on this is unambiguous. From court records to player statements to every corner of social media where this supposed conflict was meant to be playing out, there is no credible evidence of genuine friction between Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes. No beat reporter broke a story about tension in the building. No source close to either camp went on background to describe a relationship under strain. No cryptic post, no telling silence, no secondhand account from anyone with actual access to these two men suggested that anything between them had changed. What exists is a clip, a thumbnail, and an algorithm that rewards urgency over accuracy. That is the entire foundation of the heated footage narrative, and it is paper thin. What is not paper thin is 8 years of evidence pointing in the exact opposite direction. Kelce calling Mahomes' family in December 2025, in the middle of the hardest season either of them had faced. Kelce turning down more money from other teams to stay in Kansas City for one more run at a championship. Mahomes rehabbing a torn ACL with a specific, publicly stated goal of being ready for Week 1 of the 2026 season. Back on the field, back with his tight end, back in the fight. Andy Reid returning for another year, describing himself as fired up for the reset, an organization retooling aggressively, betting on the belief that what Mahomes and Kelce built together is not finished. These are not the moves of two men who are done with each other. These are the moves of two men who looked at a brutal, disappointing, injury-shortened season and decided, independently and then together, that it was not the end of the story. The era of inevitability is over. The version of the Kansas City Chiefs that simply showed up every January and waited for the AFC to figure out who would lose to them, that version ended in 2025. It ended when the losses accumulated and the offense stalled and a quarterback's knee gave out in December and a decade-long playoff streak came to a close. That chapter is finished, but the window is not closed. And the most important reason it is not closed is the same reason it was ever open in the first place. Two men who want to win, who want it for each other with a sincerity that their entire off-field relationship documents, and who have built the kind of trust that does not come apart because of one bad season and a moment that looked different on camera than it actually was. The footage that went viral tells you that Kelce and Mahomes compete with a ferocity that most people will never fully understand from the outside. It tells you that a season of mounting losses, public doubt, playoff elimination, and a torn ligament did not push them apart. It brought them closer. It tells you that the sideline is where these two men do their most honest communicating, and that the honesty can look jarring when you see it without context. There is no blow-up. There is no beef. There is no first public fight between Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes. The real footage has been playing without interruption since 2018. And based on everything that has happened since that sideline camera caught its 3 seconds, the re-signing, the rehab, the return of Reid, the retooling of a franchise that still believes in what these two men can do together, it is still playing now. Thanks for watching. Check out other cards on the screen.